Blade Runner is considered one of the most groundbreaking science fiction films of all time. It is widely revered by fans and critics alike for the amazing visual effects and story, but also for posing deep philosophical questions that cinema had never addressed before. But Blade Runner wasn't always held in such high regard. When the movie first came out, it completely divided critics into those who thought it was complex and ahead of its time, and those who thought it was too slow and not plot-driven enough. Sheila Benson of the LA Times called it Blade Crawler because of its slow pace, and Pat Berman, another critic, wrote that it was, quote, science fiction pornography. If we look at Blade Runner 2049, the sequel to the original, which opened at the box office only a few months ago, we see a similar reception to the film, yet different in one critical way. This time, instead of a negative reaction from critics, we see lack of viewership from audiences. Denis Villeneuve, the movie's director, was surprised by the underwhelming opening weekend results, saying, "It's a mystery. All the indexes and marketing tools they were using predicted that it would be a success. The film was acclaimed by critics, so everyone expected the first weekend's results to be impressive, and they were shocked. They still don't understand." People have speculated that the lack of interest among some moviegoers might be due to the long runtime and the fact that the film relies on its predecessor at moments. But this is a blockbuster movie with an award-winning cast. Ryan Gosling and Harrison Ford are cultural icons and some of the largest film stars of all time. It received 87% on Rotten Tomatoes and high praise from respected film critics. Most of all, it wasn't shadowed by any other large box office movies at its release, like some underappreciated films have been. So why were these two movies so underrated at the time of their release? Well, to answer that question, let's go back in time to the mid-Renaissance in Pisa, Italy.
We found this in your classroom. Can you explain it?
It's a model of the universe.
But the sun is at the center.
Yes, and all the planets, including the Earth, revolve around it.
Professor, the church will not allow you to teach this idea.
But it's the truth.
A young scientist named Galileo is building telescopes to observe planets and moons in our solar system invisible to the naked eye. During his studies, Galileo discovers a theory proposed by another astronomer, Copernicus, a century before. Copernicus suggests that instead of a geocentric system where the sun and planets revolve around the Earth, the planets, including Earth, must revolve around the sun. Galileo is immediately inspired by this theory, and better yet, he can prove its validity with the astronomical observations he had made and his work on tidal systems. He focuses all his efforts into writing a theory, and finally, after he has a strong case with enough evidence, he presents his findings to the scientific community in Italy. Instead of being appraised for his revolutionary thought, Galileo was laughed at for his ridiculous beliefs and accused of heresy. He argued his case to the church, but he was ultimately placed under house arrest for his rebellious beliefs, and eventually died there. It was 50 years later that the heliocentric theory finally became accepted, thanks to Sir Isaac Newton's theory of gravity. We can see this same phenomenon happen again and again throughout history. Scientists like Galileo, whose theories were written off as delusional. Artists like Van Gogh, who died starving and depressed due to the unpopularity of his paintings. Or even in the last century with writers like Franz Kafka, who spent most of his life as an insurance officer and an employee in an asbestos factory, and wanted all of his work to be burned after his death, but fortunately it was not. Now he is considered one of the most influential writers of the 20th century. This trope is one that repeats itself over and over again. Blade Runner was, in 1982, one example of these vastly underappreciated works of art. Ridley Scott, the director and visionary behind the movie, had ideas about the future that very few people shared in the 80s. The questions it raised about the time it was born into were new and foreign to most audiences, and it took years for it to grow into the widely renowned cinematic masterpiece it is today. It would not be an overstatement to say that Blade Runner 2049, if not quite as original as its predecessor, is still a masterful cinematic accomplishment in its own right. Unlike the majority of modern mainstream action blockbusters, it seeks to make the audience mildly uncomfortable at times, and plants ideas in the heads of viewers that grow over the course of the film. Most of all, though, it shows a world in which things are completely different to today's, yet strikingly relatable. This, I believe, is the greatest testament to Blade Runner's genius. The original film has developed into a kind of prophecy for what lies ahead. It's only a year until 2019, the year in which the movie takes place, and for better or for worse, we don't have flying cars or replicants yet. But we are definitely moving in that direction, and parts of our lives look eerily similar as it does in the dystopian future shown in the film. For example, in the movie, electronic signs selling everything from Coca-Cola to Atari video games are integrated into the structure of the city. The same thing is visible now in any one of Earth's mega-cities. 3 of these 4 pictures are taken in cities around the world, and one of them is an image from the original Blade Runner in 1982. The visual similarities are uncanny. Now, advertising is everywhere. On our phones, the internet, everywhere we look. The new sequel took note of this new reality and exaggerated it to the extent it could evolve to within 35 years of now. Who knows? Maybe by the year 2049, we'll be living in a similar world to the one seen in the movie. Revolutionary thinkers, artists, and philosophers will never be fully appreciated in their time. It always takes time for new ideas and methods to be accepted by society. It's the unfortunate nature of humans to be wary of new things and change. But our duty as consumers and judges of content is to keep an open mind towards new thoughts, no matter how foreign they might be. If we judge too quickly or based only on first impressions, we won't grow and learn as a society. Or, worst of all, we might lose control of the direction our collective future is headed in. The question is, what underappreciated work, artistic or otherwise, is right under our noses, only to be found decades into the future as one of the most formative works of our era?